On October 21st, the Agile Government Network met to present its findings from the past year. In part one, the staff focused on the developments in Agile management in the federal government. In part two, the staff focused on developments in Agile management in public administration education. In part three, the staff focused on developments in Agile management from around the globe. You can find links to the other two parts of the meeting and to the Agile Government Center webpage in this video's description. I hope you enjoy the program. Welcome, everyone, to our Agile Government Network meeting. I'm Joe Mitchell, Director of Strategic Initiatives and International Programs at the National Academy of Public Administration. Wanted to welcome you here today. We're going to talk today about lessons learned from our federal, educational, and international work. I also wanted to note that this is a meeting of Agile Government Network, and it will also be recorded and made available as on-demand content for the Academy's annual meeting that is scheduled from November 3rd to the 9th. So there will be people participating today and also people who will be able to watch it on demand at a later date. So I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. And again, thank you for participating today. So we've organized this day in three different blocks. So first, we'll be talking about Agile at the federal level with some advice to leaders and practitioners. We'll have time for Q&A with each of these blocks. The second block is going to be Agile in education, training current and future leaders. And then the last content block will be Agile around the globe, principles, trust, and competence in government. So that will be our structure today. And again, thank you for being here. So without further ado, I'd like to ask virtually Sally Jaggar, who's a project director at the Academy, and James Higgins, a senior research associate at the Academy, kind of come to the stage. We will be talking about Agile at the federal level with some advice to leaders and practitioners based on the work that we've been doing the past couple of years. So Sally and James, welcome to our panel conversation.
Glad to be here.
Great to have you. And you all have both been doing so much of the work on our Agile federal work stream. So I'll first of all talk a little bit about, kind of where we are, the work that we've been doing. Sally's going to talk about the importance of Agile government, what we're learning there. I'll talk a little bit about some of the impediments, and James is going to talk about what we're learning that leaders can do within the federal context. So just to kind of level set where we've been, the Agile Government Center was established in 2019 along with our Grand Challenges in Public Administration. It's a joint partnership with the IBM Center for the Business of Government. And over the past couple of years has released a number of products. The Road to Agile Government, Ed DeSev, our coordinator, produced this report. And as many of you know, he worked with the network to develop Agile government principles. And we've continued to iterate on those in an Agile fashion. And in fact, the latest version of those was sent out to the network in advance of this session. So continuing to work on that. We also had a federal Agile management project. This was a joint Academy Project Management Institute report. It was supported by and with the Freeman Charitable Trust and the Project Management Institute to look at how the federal government can become more agile. And the core message there was Agile has a lot of promise, but turning that promise into reality requires commitment and deliberate action. Our team issued 5 major recommendations for practical steps that federal departments and agencies can take to implement Agile in their own organizations and programs, and really believes that those recommendations can help improve American government. I will put the link to the full report. Many of you have seen it. It was released last December. I will put that full report link in the chat here, so you can take a look at it if you haven't. We're also currently doing a follow-up study to that work on Agile federal regulation. We're just starting that. That's also supported by and with the Freeman Charitable Trust and the Project Management Institute to develop a white paper to seek to determine how federal agencies can use Agile principles and practices to create regulations more quickly, effectively, and equitably. Major topic. We're just starting that work, and we expect to release the report in the spring of 2022. And then another recent activity was with the Federal Executive Institute, where we had the opportunity to provide a day-long training to about 30 federal senior executives on Agile management. So lots of activities going on. I'm happy to report those to you. And we definitely need your continued involvement and support. The network has been a great source of insights and connections for us, and we look forward to continuing to work with you all on lots of these activities. So Sally, I wanted to get your perspective. I know we've been learning a lot about Agile government, and you've been thinking a lot about kind of the challenge and why and how Agile. So I wanted to get your sense of kind of lessons learned from that front.
Thanks, Joe, and I'm delighted to be here. This has really been a terrific set of projects to work on and great folks to work with. I wanted just to make briefly 3 points. The first one is the challenge that we're facing, and this has to do with why Agile is important. You know, society and the economy have and continue to evolve, but government has just not been up to or keeping up with that evolution. Many say that government is mired in bureaucracy, and without change, it cannot keep up with the demands for quick and decisive action today and going forward. It's something that we're all seeing. We're all still spending too much time standardizing procedures and formalizing rules across agencies, making sure that nothing is done incorrectly. Our observation is that this makes us sluggish, so we're often running to catch up, not getting us ready to handle what's coming down the pike. In other words, we're more backward looking or safety focused rather than preparing for the future and doing things in the most expeditious way possible. So why Agile? What we've found in the work we've done is that Agile really can be a game changer to revolutionize government operations. Agile best positions agencies and departments to address today's demands and issues. And this approach can better bring together and move forward parts of the organization or network in a crisis, can help build trust in government by improving outcomes. And this is one of Ed's favorite themes that he'll be talking about a little bit later, can increase the efficiency and the timeliness of results of government initiatives. And by including the customer can lead to results that actually do what the customer needs to have done. Sometimes government needs to just improve services. Sometimes what's at stake is life or death. So the third thing is how Agile, and James is going to put up one of my favorite images and slides, which encapsulates lots of the characteristics and major features of Agile. Agile prioritizes end user satisfaction and results. It empowers personnel. Small teams do the work in multiple short periods of time. Individuals operate within a focused set of networks. It demands innovative tools and working approaches that facilitate innovation, support problem solving. One of my favorite things is that risk is identified and addressed early. And to use a Steve Denning idea, focus is on doing, not documenting. Leaders' jobs in Agile are to accept risk, empower innovation, smooth the way for working teams, and then happily to celebrate results. You see here the difference between the waterfall project and the Agile project timeline and flow. So it's like learning a strange foreign language, says Steve Denning. It's only over time and through actual experience and practice that Agile becomes second nature and automatic. This is not doing Agile, it's about being Agile. It's a matter of culture as well as an operational framework. And those are the points I wanted to make, Joe.
Great. Well, thank you. So we're learning a lot about the importance of Agile government. We also know that there are, shockingly enough, a lot of barriers, impediments to Agile. Those include, lack of knowledge and understanding of Agile. It's amazing to us what we've discovered that people really do think this is only applicable to IT or it's only applicable to the private sector, certainly not public sector management. So that's a barrier to overcome in terms of just the sense of, what Agile is and should be. There are also, certainly in the federal context, cultural and behavioral barriers to Agile implementation. We found, that there is a lack of experience in the federal government with truly empowered cross-functional teams. There are some of those teams, but not nearly enough. And of course, there's a lot of risk aversion and lack of tolerance for changes in course. And some of those are traced back to, regulatory and procedural barriers to agility that include, contracting and procurement barriers, hiring barriers, oversight, and our annual highly constrained budgeting process. So there are a lot of barriers to Agile that make it more difficult, but we also have found that there are things that leaders can do to implement an Agile culture and to build, that Agile team, that even within this context, they can do that. And James, I know you've been leading a lot of our research on that, and so I wanted to kind of get your perspective on that, kind of what leaders can do in this context.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. And when you start transitioning from Agile in theory and Agile into practice, obviously leaders play a very important role in that. And especially during our event with the Federal Executive Institute, we learned a lot about this. So, we learned from Steve Denning, who literally wrote the book on Agile and the Age of Agile. We learned from Kahir Danani, a practitioner from Boston Consulting Group. And then we were also able to hear direct feedback from senior executives at the event. So just starting at a more macro view, from Denning, he made a very compelling case that we are entering a new era in terms of businesses and government management. We're moving from the industrial area into a digital age. So he talked about how to really move an organization from this industrial area management into digital leadership, and it can be quite difficult. He laid out a 5-point leadership game plan for enacting these changes. First off, starting with learning about Agile and leadership, forming a small leadership team, making sure that they have buy-in. Find innovators and early adopters. There are always going to be, a couple people. It might just be, 3 to 10% of people who are at the very least curious to learn about this and to give it a try. Really start with them. Inspire the early and the late majority. So that's where a lot of the buy-in is going to need to come in, is convincing these early and late majority people that Agile is worthwhile, that it's effective, that it does the things that it says. It identifies risks. It gives you more value for the same amount of work. And finally, ignoring the laggards. There are always going to be those people who, they just won't ever be convinced. And sometimes they can start off, almost being disguised as an early and late majority. But at some point, you have to identify who those laggards are and, ignore them, move on, keep pushing the Agile management agenda forward. Scoping down a little bit more into what leaders can do at an organizational level. Kahir Danani talked about organizational enablers. So starting at the top, making sure you have that leadership buy-in, handing over the keys to decision-making. So taking on the decisions that you have to make, but also delegating the ones that can't be delegated. Establishing SWAT teams. So having experienced Agile members come in and create an infrastructure for a new project under the view of the project manager. And then helping develop and implement plans such as like work breakdown structure, a schedule that incorporates Agile management before handing off that structure to a normal project team. Number 4, leading with evidence, making sure that you have concrete examples of how Agile has helped your organization or other organizations in similar situations. Creating a safe space to pilot and over communicating. Next, he spoke about Agile leadership practices, especially clear direction for teams, transparency of tasks and the workload, managing through agreed outputs and objectives, and having more individual autonomy and accountability. Number 3, he gets down a little bit lower into Agile routines, the daily and the weekly routines that you and your team need to implement, such as the daily stand-up. I know actually at the Academy for our strategic initiatives team, we've actually started doing this as well. Just going over the key objectives you have for that day, what you did yesterday, and any obstacles that stand in your way. It's a very 15-minute meeting. It's short, it's quick, but it really gets you into this Agile mindset and this iterative mindset. Next up is iterations. So as we showed in Sally's slide, those short working and feedback cycles, identifying objectives and key results, making sure that you have alignment through all of those with each team. Backlog planning, so empowering this autonomy required for this continuous process, having that to-do list always there. And then finally, a sprint review, so those weekly check-ins to see what you've accomplished throughout the week. Next, we got the feedback from the senior executives on really what they can do on an individual level to help their organization or agency build into a more agile agency or organization, how they themselves could help mitigate impediments, and also how to build a sustainable agile culture in their organization. So some of the feedback just at a high level here in terms of what they can do to build an agile organization was provide training, focus more on key outcomes, engage stakeholders, demonstrate small achievements, and create small self-directed teams. And finally, establish succession planning to make sure that Agile would be in their organization to stay. In terms of mitigating impediments at an individual level, one of the things they would say was how to explain how Agile can be used outside of IT. They mentioned about reassessing their resources and making sure that their groups are able to work collaboratively and share resources to accomplish mandated work, talking through principles and actually practicing them in meetings, not having a fake Agile or an Agile name only process. One person said, if I'm at the very least going to try to clear or get rid of one requirement out of a stream of 100 requirements that doesn't have any value added. We're going to start there and we're going to move on. And then just identifying a small group of innovators, getting your core group together. Finally, building a more agile culture. They've talked about just kicking off discussions and meetings with direct reports, articulating their vision and creating excitement around that project, hiring an agile coach and beginning training with that. Finding 2 to 3 people with the capacity and curiosity to learn more about Agile. That kind of loops back into the innovators and the early majority that we were talking about. And then just the basics, engaging, collaborating, collecting feedback, facilitating Agile training for a leadership team. So we kind of see that when we're trying to implement this into actual practice, it's going to take a full approach from the macro all the way down to the micro individual level to implement these in agencies.
Great. Well, thank you, James. I know it sounds like you've been learning a lot about kind of practices, even within a highly constrained kind of context that leaders can adopt. And I always like kind of getting to that practical. Here are some practical suggestions. We also, within this environment, based on our report, we had recommended, for example, that Agile be a part of the President's management agenda. So we're waiting to see to what extent that is that is put in, and also just in general that there does need to be empowerment of agencies. So agency leaders can only do but so much. They do need to be empowered, by OMB, by GSA, by the President's Management Council, and then they also need to be empowered inside their departments and agencies by their department and agency leaders, both political and career. So there's a lot of work here to be done. Also, we noted that there are, of course, a lot of statutory barriers to Agile, and so we've recommended that OMB and others identify those. What are the biggest impediments and work to get those done, to work with Congress. Obviously, that's a heavy lift. So in the near term, we think that it's important to look at what are the non-statutory barriers, what are the most significant barriers, and try to work to address those inside the executive branch. And of course, training is always important also. So those are some of the things that we've been learning. I do see a couple of questions. So there's a question about examples or techniques involving Agile regulation. We're in the very early stages of that report, doing the study, but we have examined some of the work of the World Economic Forum and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And they've been doing work with different concepts, including anticipatory regulation, where you identify innovations and their implications, outcome-focused regulation, where use agile management to make sure you're defining and assessing desired outcomes instead of kind of compliance tick boxes. Experimental regulation, data-driven regulation, and international regulatory cooperation. So there are kind of principles out there that others have been developing, and so we will be drawing upon those as part of our work. So we'll make sure that we're doing that, and we'll have a full briefing to you all in the spring, because that report is just starting. And then there was also a question about ensuring managers and supervisors have the necessary skill sets to empower and engage with employees. I agree that is a significant issue, and that's one of the reasons that we did our Federal Executive Institute training, was to make sure that people do, one, know what Agile is, and then know some of the practical techniques for how to do that. And we have recommended that Agile management be incorporated into federal training programs, including those at FEI. That hands-on opportunities be provided to leaders and employees. And that we also look at existing platforms for Agile and techniques, and work to incorporate those into instruction. In addition, we think that there needs to be connections to universities. I think that our university community, both in terms of the kind of pre-service students, and also kind of your executive level, mid-career students who are getting certificates or mid-career degrees, the universities are an important part of that training. So obviously training is very important. So those are all great questions. Are there any other questions for our team? And maybe while you're thinking about those, I just asked Sally, James, if there are any remaining thoughts that you all have. Sally, anything else that you want to share with the group?
Well, I think I continue to be taken by Steve Dinning's comment that Agile isn't just a matter of doing, it's a matter of being, and that it does take a mindset change. And I think that that's an important kind of context to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Agile as a mindset. James, any other thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, just one other thing that came up. I noticed that some of the senior executives were talking about sharing their own experiences as they try to implement any of these practices just with each other. And I think with any new practice like that, it is important to give live feedback and almost create that community, so that you're not alone. If you're facing this one obstacle, there might be somebody else in the boat with you, and you can learn from each other on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing that you're not the only one, you're not on an island all by yourself, is really critical. And being able to just continue to iterate and learn. I mean, Agile is really about learning and getting that fed back into the organization. So those are just some of the things that we've been learning and working on. And again, we'll be reporting back as we do more with the Agile Regulation Project and other work. But thank you all so much for your time today, and for your continued support of Agile.